Blackie, it's such a pleasure to have you here today at the Texas Law Center, and I just want to have a conversation with you about your long career and your work as a lawyer. What was it in your background that made you decide to want to become a lawyer?
Well, Harper, let me first say it's indeed an honor for me to be here today, and a true privilege to be with you and to be asked to talk with you. From the standpoint of becoming a lawyer, I had an uncle, Baron Holmes, who was a lawyer in Charleston, South Carolina. My dad's from Charleston, South Carolina, and I think my dad always wanted my brother and me to be lawyers. And he told me one time, he said, son, a legal education will be a terrific grounding for any job you pursue. So I went to law school.
What did your dad do?
My dad, as he used to put it, he was a pipe peddler for National Tube Company, which was a subsidiary of U.S. Steel Corporation.
Okay.
And I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, where he had a job there as salesman for National Tube. And then Mom and Dad transferred in 1936 to Dallas, and I've lived there ever since.
Okay, so you've been in Dallas since 1936 and in University Park since when?
Mother and Daddy bought the house that my wife Judy and I live in right now in 1941. We bought it from them in 1979, and but for my 3 years in the Air Force and the time Judy and I were married from 63 to 79, I've lived in that house. So from 36 to going to the Air Force in 59 and then 79 forward. So the whole time, my house was built in 35.
You know how to get home, don't you?
So I don't get lost.
Tell us about your education and your military service.
Well, I graduated from Highland Park High School in 1953 and went to SMU. My high school class was, I believe it was the last midterm January class at Highland Park High School. So then went to SMU in January and got my undergraduate degree, a BBA, in 57, and went to law school at SMU and graduated with an LLB in 59. And have been with the law firm in Dallas, Burford and Ryburn, since 1962 when I got out of the Air Force.
So right after law school, you went in the service?
Yes, I did. I was somewhat chagrined when I got my orders in September of 59, because my request to have a delay to be able to go to law school had not gone through, and I was assigned to some base somewhere as a personnel officer. And so the ROTC detachment at SMU got behind me and got my request to go to law school so I could have deferment to graduate from law school, and then I did and went into the Judge Advocate General's Corps of the Air Force.
I guess that got you started on trial work right away, being a JAG officer.
Their base, I was stationed at Reese Air Force Base in Lubbock. All 3 years of my service as Air Training Command Base, and it did not have general court-martial convening authority, but I did try some general court-martials on assignments around the state, but primary special court-martials. And then during the course of my tenure, I got interested in government contract litigation and went to the school at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for a month, and almost came close to making Air Force a career, but I met my wife.
Okay, and she didn't want to move around that much.
Well, that's a story in itself, but she didn't. I met her about the time I had to make the decision of getting out of the Air Force or staying in. And we met in a wedding in Houston, Texas in June of 62. And I was getting out in September of 62. So there's either stay available to be with her or be transferred in the Air Force, and the pull was too strong.
I understand. What's your wife's name?
Judy.
Judy. And where's Judy from?
Judy's from Lufkin, Texas. She was born in Houston. Her mother and dad's family, well, both sides of her mother and father's family are from Houston. And she was born in Houston but lived in Lufkin.
That's great. What did you learn in the military that you were able to translate into your career as a lawyer, having served?
I think I really enjoyed the military. I liked the structure. That helped me. There's another aspect of military service that it's a response to a chain of command that gives you a feeling that of responsibility and duty, so to speak. I mean, you wouldn't think of not being on time to a meeting with the base commander or with the staff judge advocate or any meeting that's called. And so from that standpoint, I would always arrive in the courtroom at least 15 minutes ahead of time and try to make it a habit of being on time wherever you go.
So you developed some good discipline habits. You probably also developed the ability to respect the office, even if you might not respect the person holding it.
No, that's a very well stated. Of course, there takes all kinds to make up our world, and you run into them, those that you don't agree with and those that you do, not only in military life but in our civilian life. But it was a wonderful experience. I truly enjoyed the service in the Air Force, and as I said previously, I came very close to making it a career.
Well, you know, you have been, in this day and age, it's unusual, with the same firm, law firm, your entire career. Tell us a little bit about your law firm and how it is you've managed to stay there so long.
Well, I've had opportunities to go elsewhere, and I guess I've been very blessed to have stayed, and I've never been one. Well, I'm still married to Judy of 46 years. I live in a house I grew up in, which Mom and Dad bought it in 1941. I've been with the same law firm since 1962. So I'm not one for change. So my law firm was founded in 1907. This year will be 102 years old. We celebrated our 100th back in 2007 and received the Texas Treasurer Award, which was awarded. We're the first law firm in Texas to get it and the first business in Dallas to get it. And some of the partners came down and were recognized on the floor of the legislature and the Senate, House of Representatives, Senate down here. Real nice ceremony. And we've had, over the years, members of the firm go on the bench, and former members like Clarence Guittard, he was Chief Justice and Associate Justice of Dallas Court of Appeals. Craig Enoch was on that court before he went to the Supreme Court. And W.O. Taylor, Mac Taylor, was with our firm for a while and then went on the federal bench from the Strasburger firm in Dallas. And we have now, at the present time, 17 equity partners, 4 non-equity partners, of which I am one, and 6 associates. Okay. And we created the first charter for the Baptist Foundation of Texas. We started from a legal standpoint and did the legal work for the founding of Texas Power and Light and Lone Star Steel Company and Texas Employers Insurance Association. So we've been around and been involved and seen the ups and downs of the legal practice and have managed to stay viable.
Well, I'm sure I'm certain that your firm has a culture that honors service to your community and to the Bar Association. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, he's no longer with the firm, but the culture was there all the time for service to the community, to charities, but he really started the ball rolling relative to service to the bar, and that's John Estes. John left our firm. He was with the firm when I came with Burford Reiber in 1962, but John was very, very active in the bar, and that rubbed off on me and got me started, and I always had an interest in it. And the firm wanted folks to be active in the community and in the bar.
Well, tell us a little bit. I know that you have done a lot of bar work through the years. Describe generally some of the highlights of it.
Harper, I guess the highlight of my contribution to the bar and to the legal profession is the work done in the area of professionalism and civility. And I was fortunate enough to be appointed by George Chapman, who at the time was president of the Dallas Bar Association, to head the task force of the Dallas Bar to look at professionalism and civility. And this task force came up with a lawyer's creed and the guidelines for professionalism and civility.
What had changed from the time you began your career and became interested in being a lawyer to that point in time that brought professionalism and civility to the forefront as an issue?
As I see it, it's the pace at which lawyers practice now as compared to when I started practicing and for the years in the first portion of my career. The technology now is so much faster. I know that our Supreme Court last year in 2007 in a mandamus case made mention of today's technology being such that in a moment matters can be produced that would take a long time in days gone by to get it done. So all you have to do is go to the computer and have it reconstruct for you, issue right out to where you don't have to go to a file or where you have them stored to get forms and so forth. I know when I came to work or interviewed first in Burford River in '62, I walked in the reception area and there sat what I call a, quote, hello girl sitting at a bank of a switchboard where she actually plugged the leads in to get you to the telephone in an office back down the hall. And to be able to get an outside line to make a phone call, you had to pick the phone up and get the switchboard operator and she'd plug you in, you know. So it's a technology and the internet and the WWW, World Wide Web, that have changed things so much. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's certainly, it's good, it's great, but you've got to step back and appreciate that technology and use it properly.
You know, I've heard lawyers older than you and me say that the worst thing ever happened to the law practice was the copy machine. And of course now, one of my things I always like to say, the emails.
Right.
Well, sometimes I'm not as thoughtful in an email as I might be if I wrote a letter or if I made a phone call.
Well, exactly. And you know, you can remember too, Harper, that the copying machines used to have those wet cylinders, and you put what you wanted to copy, and it came out wet, and you had to lay it down, let it dry, and trying to get a typewriter to carbon three copies was a feat for a secretary. You know?
It was hard to have a paper war in those days.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So,
that's right.
And maybe that's okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Texas Lawyers Creed, because I think I mentioned this to you earlier. I'm very taken with the preamble. It says, I am a lawyer. I am entrusted by the people of Texas to preserve and improve our legal system. And it ends, there's some in between, but it ends that we do this for no other reason than because it's right. How is it that the three of you, Mr. Hagans and Justice Cook, and you came up, how did you decide to get started and organize this?
Well, I think it was Eugene Cook's bidding from the Supreme Court. And it took a while to put it together, and Eugene was involved with the putting together the concept. Fred and I did a lot of the writing with Gene's interaction, but it came about, I think, from what was being perceived, and what was happening was a, quote, Rambo, end quote, litigation that was going on without any deference to civility and professionalism, and setting the deposition by notice without making a phone call. And taking a default judgment when you know that your adversary is ready and willing to go to trial and for some reason didn't show up, and those types of things that maybe we could let it know that although that might be the right thing to do, that might be right legally, but it's not right professionally, and just try to get the attention of the legal profession to be more civil and more considerate of their fellow lawyer.
And how do you, obviously it makes life easier for lawyers. This is a hard enough job without doing that to one another. But how do you see that it serves the public that we serve as lawyers to do that?
First, I think in serving the public, it reduces the cost of litigation. Just for instance, like I mentioned a minute ago, rather than picking up the telephone when you file for set a deposition or a hearing or what, you file a motion, you file a hearing, you send out notice of date or a notice of the hearing, and there's a conflict on the other side. Well, if you can't resolve it with a phone call, you got to go to the courthouse, and that costs the client money. And I think if a client knows that you're abiding by you're going to act professional and be professional and civil in your work with respect to your adversary, the client better understands and has a better feel for what justice is and how it's the ends of justice, rather than I'm not talking about not being adversarial or don't compromise your client's position in any way, but there's a way to do it in a professional manner without compromising their rights.
I think y'all focused on that when you said let's focus on matters of substance as opposed to form.
Exactly.
Let's fight the fights that need to be fought and don't fight the ones.
And it's the form that doesn't really dictate the outcome of the issue or the litigation.
You know, if you're going to, I'll ask you to forgive me for a moment, but I'm going to testify briefly because
Please do.
You put your money where your mouth is in this. I asked you a couple of years ago whether you remembered the first time we had ever spoken, and you did not. But it was when I was in a jam and phoned you. I had missed a deadline that I could fix with motions and stuff. But I was always taken by the fact that although you were busy and you were really at the top of your game, you came right to the phone and you said, sure, how long do you need? You didn't ask me anything else. You didn't ask for anything in return. And as I read this creed, I can't help but think about that time because you did not know me. Didn't know anything about me, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate that.
Well, Harper, thank you. It's just what George Pletcher and Don Bowen did when I made the request or let them know that I had an issue, and it was a very professional and I think genteel manner way to handle it. And there's no need to be unnecessarily adversarial, and there's no need to put an adversary or a fellow lawyer in a trap that he's going to get out of anyway. And I just feel that what goes around comes around, and if it's not you, I'm going to be in the same spot someday, and I would hope that the same courtesy would be extended to me.
Well, I appreciate that, and I want you to know I've always tried to remember that when I find myself in that position. I think the movies call that paying it forward.
That's right.
But there's certainly something to be said for that. You know, you mentioned the clients buying into the Texas Lawyers Creed, into professionalism, and I have heard it recommended, and I recommend it because we've begun doing it. We attach it to our engagement letter and tell them we intend to do our best to abide by it and that they agree to allow us to do so. Tell me some of the responses you've had from clients and non-lawyers about the bar's efforts and your efforts and lawyers' efforts towards professionalism and civility.
Well, I think what you get overall from clients as well as lawyers is you can't legislate good conduct. And that's not the point of the Lawyers' Creed. The Lawyers' Creed is to make clients as well as lawyers aware of the fact that the high road is better than the low road. Being civil and professional is better than being a Rambo. It inures to the benefit of the courts, the staff, who's helping in the courthouse, to the client, and to the lawyers themselves. And I just think that to operate within, especially within litigation. Now, this doesn't just apply to litigation, but it can. I know the creed was changed in 95 or just 98. I served on the committee when we had a committee that reviewed the creed on its anniversary, and we added a portion of it that applies to lawyers, corporate lawyers, not necessarily engaged in litigation. It wasn't much, but
where
it
you
applied.
redline documents
Yes,
and make sure you
yeah,
show the changes?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think the major issue is you can't legislate good conduct. But yet what the creed does, it makes folks aware of that there's another way in which you can accomplish and get the same result by not being a junkyard dog, you know.
Well, and you know, it's very practical, the organization of the creed. It talks about duties to the system overall,
Right.
Duties to the client, which I think sometimes we get so hung up on we lose sight of everything else, duties to one another, and duties to the court you're practicing in front of. You had a successful career. You tried a lot of lawsuits and won your share. Did you find that abiding by these principles cost you any W's in the won-loss column?
Not at all. And I found that as you go through, you know, your career, that when your conduct is such that you are professional and civil, that by and large you'll receive it from the other side also. I know there's a lawyer in Dallas who you know, Bob Mao, who before the Texas Lawyers Creed would take the Dallas Lawyers Creed and any opposing counsel, he would send that to them and say, I intend to abide by these tenets. I hope you will also. And so, no, I have found that it's not going to change some, but some you don't have to change, but you don't get any surprises either.
Well, let's go to the hard part. What do you do when the other guy's not going to change? What do you do about your conduct in that particular case?
You just continue on and do what you have to do in a professional, civil manner. You don't change your course in the way you do things. You just may turn up the heat a little bit. But by that, what I mean is make them understand that you will go to the courthouse to get the issue resolved. You will do what's necessary, but you aren't going to be unreasonable about it in any event.
Okay. Yeah, just play on your own field. Play your
Exactly.
game. Okay. How is it that I'm intrigued by the duties that you came up with and the way you broke it out? How did that come to pass? Was that carried forward from the Dallas Creed?
That was determined by the four entities, so to speak, that's reflected in the creed, and to bear out that there are different duties owed to the courts, you as an officer of the court, to the opposing counsel, because you're operating in different areas and at different times with those individuals. And so we tried to set forth concepts of professional conduct in those four areas involving the courts, the client, the adversary, and the system.
One of the things that struck me about the creed at the time it was written, and y'all published some articles in the Bar Journal and stuff that went out at the same time, was the emphasis on having fun while you're practicing law. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that's what I've always said. I think it's a change from the way things used to be to the speed and the technology we have now. the stress, the harassment takes out the fun and the camaraderie that you had in times gone by. Not that you don't have that now, but it's there with stress being one thing that does dilute the fun. And
You know, I've always wondered, and we all know people like this who dread going to work every day. I don't. I feel blessed to be a lawyer, but I do think that you're right. That this takes put some of the fun back into it when you can get everybody on the same page.
that's right. You know, I heard, speaking about wanting to get up and not go to work every day, I've heard Darrell Royal say once that he cannot remember a Saturday morning or a morning before a game that when he brushed his teeth, he didn't gag on his toothbrush. And that's not to say that he doesn't enjoy the game, but you know, he's not nervous, but he's got butterflies, he's concerned, he's thinking about the ball game. His thoughts are all on that ball game, and that's the way you are, or I feel about when you've got an issue or you're going to trial or you're going to take a tough deposition or so forth. That's part of it, that's expected. But the unnecessary stress that's applied comes with Rambo litigation and lack of professionalism. That's the purpose of the creed, is to try to do away with it. But I think one of the things that always any lawyer must guard and hold inviolate is his reputation. Any young lawyer today, or any lawyer, should do everything they can to have an enviable reputation, and always guard your reputation all your life.
You know, one of the things young lawyers worry about today is kind of a sense of alienation. I know, at least when I started practicing law, and it's probably even more true when you did, that so much of it was built on reputation. We didn't do emails. We didn't do faxes very often.
Mm-hmm.
But does that concern you, the kind of everybody being off in their own office all the time, as opposed to being at docket calls every Friday?
You know, that's an interesting question, because you have e-filings now. You don't go to the courthouse. You don't see each other at docket calls like you used to. Harper, I don't know. I guess it's if it can operate within a sphere of not causing a detriment to the practice from the standpoint of professionalism, ethics, I guess we're going to have to learn to live with it. And that's a sign of that's part of the times and part of the practice now, whereas when I started, it wasn't. Right. So right now it's what they're learning, and as long as they operate in that new sphere with some of the old concepts that are put into the new sphere from the standpoint of civility and professionalism that existed somewhat more, I want to say, because of the lack of the technology and the speed with which you could do things. Continue those on into this day and time and practice them, then we'll be all right.
What do you like most about practicing law?
Well, let me answer it this way. What I like the ability to, at times, in working with others, to have it less stressful. But at the same time, you've got to have the drive and the perseverance to represent your client, and yet do it in a fashion that you're civil and professional. And when you've done that, and you've done your best, and you haven't left anything in your notebook in the trial of a case, and even though you have an adverse result, you know you've done your best in trying and that you've been thoroughly prepared, then the jury's spoken and you accept it, and most of the time your client will accept it too and realize that you've done the best you can for them, and that you have been thoroughly prepared, and represented their interest. And that is, it's not necessarily winning or losing. It's wonderful to win a case when that jury knocks and they come in your favor. That's tremendous. But yet, everybody can't win. And when you do have those times when you haven't won, then the satisfaction in not winning is knowing you've done your best and you've tried a good case, and your client understands that also.
When you look back over the course of your career, do juries generally get it right?
Let me answer that this way. Yes, to the point that they view the evidence that may not be strong enough to support their verdict, but they feel that that evidence is. That's where the NOV comes in, and the judge, either on a law question or applying the evidence to the law, it doesn't measure up. But from the standpoint of what the jury has before them and what they have to consider, I think by and large their verdicts are usually right.
What are some of the work you've done that you're proudest of when you look back on it?
I think there are three cases that went to the Texas Supreme Court that I tried, briefed, and argued in the Texas Supreme Court. And the first case I argued in the Texas Supreme Court was Employers Casualty Company versus Transport Insurance Company, and involved a coverage question. But I'll never forget Justice Stakely wrote the dissent. It was 6-3, and Justice Stakely wrote the dissent. I was relying on one case, and I'll never forget it, Traders in General versus Hicks. And it involved an issue on subrogation. And the Chief Justice said in his opinion, just as one swallow does not a summer make, one case does not a trend establish. And I was trying to say that that one case established a trend. I'll never forget that quote. And then the next case was Jackson versus Dallas Transit, which was a shooting on a bus in Dallas. Got an NOV, plaintiff's verdict, NOV, reversed in the Court of Appeals for the plaintiff, and in the Supreme Court reversed and rendered it for the Dallas Transit. And the last case was a workers' compensation case of Hubbard versus Texas Employers Insurance Association out of the Lone Star Steel plant. But Harper, in those days, you know, you tried the case, you did the post-trial motions, you prepared the points of error, you prepared the brief, and you argued it in whichever appellate court you landed. Didn't have the folks going down to the courthouse with you on the charge conference and so forth. Not that that's bad, but that's a change, and that's different from the way it was done previously.
You really get invested when you nurture a case from start to the very ultimate conclusion.
And you know it well, yes.
Absolutely. In talking to young lawyers who might have an opportunity to view this interview, what is some advice that you would give the young lawyer today?
Well, I think the main concept that, and it affects any walk of life, any occupation, is your reputation. And you've got to have a good reputation, because not only it makes you feel better, I think you do a better job, your client feels better about you and the job you're going to do for them. And you can't, once a reputation is tarnished, it's hard to get it back. And the young lawyer to my mind's eye, needs to look at three bedrocks. Number one, courage, which is reasoned. Character, which must be moral. And perseverance, which by mind should be professional and civil. And you must guard your reputation all your life and abide by those principles: reason, courage, moral character, and professional perseverance.
If you were a young lawyer just starting out, what would you say are the challenges facing the profession in the near term and in the long term?
Well, I think for the profession as a whole, and especially us as trial lawyers, is the preservation of the jury system, and also the preservation of the rights that afforded us by our forefathers through their noble effort in drafting the Constitution, and in preserving those, and abiding by the oath you take as a lawyer, defending and protecting the Constitution and those rights. You will make it ever more possible for us to be a free nation living under justice and the rule of law. And that's a challenge that would be with a lawyer all the way through their career.
I guess it's advice you could have given a young lawyer in the 1850s, the
Well,
1950s.
myself, exactly.
Okay. I think that's fair. We've spoken about Judy quite a bit, and the help she's given you through your life and career and making decisions. Tell us about your family life and how you balanced work and having a family and the career that you had.
The family has always been very supportive of my travels and having to be gone, and taking depositions and going to trial. I always tried, if possible, not to be out of town on Sunday night. That's not an objective that you easily achieve, but I can remember getting up at 4 o'clock on Monday morning, driving to Marshall, Texas to pick a jury, or driving to Abilene, so I'm home during Sunday with the family, and a lot of Saturdays are taken up with getting ready for trial. But the family, if you're looking at the family first, in the context of doing what's best for representing your client and getting the case ready for trial, and you got to have a family that is understanding and they're with you, and mine have been. Judy's been wonderful. My 3 boys have just been terrific over the years, and they're a very stress reducer in your litigation, and can be a big help to you in the trial of your lawsuit.
Help you put things back in context a little bit.
In perspective.
Tell us about your sons. Tell us their names, a little bit about them.
My oldest son is Jimmy. He's a 4th. James Hill Holmes, a 4th. And he is married and has 2 little girls, and lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and is a surgeon, and he's director of the burn unit at Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center in Winston-Salem. He's been there a little over 2 years now. He graduated from UT Southwestern here in Dallas, and has only been practicing 2 years because he was doing residencies and fellowships up for 10 years.
He has a lot of experience, but getting
oh,
to
my
it.
word, 10 years. And my middle son, Randall, is director of athletic ticket sales for SMU. And he and his wife, Lori, have 1 little boy, Randall Robert, who was born totally deaf. And due to the wonderful advancement in technology of medicine, he's got 2 cochlear implants in his ears, and Harper, he can hear. It's just amazing what he hears, and hear anything, and it's just doing wonderful. And my youngest son, Tucker, is married and lives 2 houses down from us, as a matter of fact, in the old, what we call the old Smith house. And he and his wife, Ann, was with Microsoft, but now she is with another company and doing quite well. And Tucker is in warehouse real estate in Dallas.
You like that granddad business?
Oh, it's wonderful. Don't get to see my 2 granddaughters in Winston-Salem enough, but seeing the little grandson is really a kick, I'll tell you. And he's a wonderful athlete, too.
You're having a good time with it.
Oh, yes, it's been a wonderful trip.
Well, I know that you have been active in your community. You grew up in that community. Tell us about your service at the City of University Park.
Well, Harper, it started some time ago. I was on the Board of Adjustment for 3 years, and then went from the Board of Adjustment to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and was on there for, I think it was 5 years, and then became chairman, and was chairman for 7 or 8 years of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Then I was on the city council as a council member from 1994 to 2000, and then went off for 2 years and came back on as a council member in 2002 till 2004, and then was elected mayor in 2004, and I will go out of office in 2010.
Now, I realize you're about to be term limited as mayor, but you said you had some pretty exciting things going on in University Park. Tell us about that.
Well, I guess the major one, Harper, is that President Bush and Ms. Bush are bringing the Bush Library to the SMU campus, which is in University Park. It's on the southeast quadrant of our city, and we're just delighted to have them come, and we have been involved in working with SMU in planning for that event.
How has your background and experience as a lawyer helped you in providing the service to the community that you've provided?
I'm more of a compromiser in trying to get things resolved, and I think being a lawyer and being a trial lawyer has helped me in that regard in settling lawsuits and trying to find the middle of the road, not only with issues involving complaints of residents, but commercial entities and even SMU. And since I've been mayor, I've really, better than I ever have before, learned to listen. And that's what the major thing I have learned is you aren't learning anything if you're talking, and you need to listen.
Well, Blackie Holmes, you have been a leader. It's been a real
Harper,
unique privilege to spend a couple of hours with you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.